Welcome to VPG's Virtual Water Cooler Chat podcast, where we share lessons and stories of women professionals to help empower other women and expand a greater circle of influence so we walk our journey with those who understand and appreciate us. Today, we'll chat with Jessica Kaiser about her path to becoming a patent attorney. Before going to law school, Jessica graduated from the Colorado School of Mines with a degree in metallurgical and materials engineering and worked for 5 years as an engineer, primarily in the oil and gas industry. After law school, Jessica clerked at both the district court level and at the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit and worked as an associate and partner at a large international firm, focusing her practice on patent litigation. She then went in-house and to the Office of General Counsel at the Federal Circuit before joining the Patent Trial and Appeal Board as an administrative patent judge, serving as an APJ for over 7 years and working closely with USPTO and PTAB leadership in developing and implementing PTAB reforms. Jessica returned to private practice in 2022 at Arnold & Porter Kaye, Scholer, LLP, where she advises clients in complex intellectual property disputes.
Jessica, thank you so much for talking to you. And one of the things that I really enjoy and really have a lot of respect for you is when I met you at the diversity breakfast at the PTAB Bar Association in 2022. I remember that I asked a question, a poll basically about PTAB Whisper. So I went around the table and asking people. I'm very good at polling, but not always good at giving opinion. And I remember you specifically, it was like, so what do you think about PTAB Whisperer? I was like, I'm just polling. She was like, you cannot poll without giving an opinion. And taking that cue, I was like, okay, well, I'll just give my opinion. I'm very good at prompts, but not necessarily offering opinion. So I did really appreciate you making it a very comfortable place for me to express my opinion. And that's why I like you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think that's not uncommon, if we're talking stereotypically about women professionals. So we tend to be better listeners sometimes than we do at being assertive with our own opinion. And if I'm honest, I don't really specifically remember prompting you for your own opinion. But I'm glad that I did, because I think it's really important to hear all the voices and to not sit on the sidelines. And so the more we encourage each other to do that, I think the better.
Exactly. It's actually good that you did not remember that you're prompting me, which means that was authentic and genuine. So it was like the heat of the moment. Why don't you speak?
Well, and it's so funny because that conference came within the first couple weeks of my return to private practice. And so I was very, very new at having the private practice perspective and just really sort of hungry for input and connection and all those things. So I think it was nice that you and I got to meet each other in that space when I was very, very new.
Well, I'm pretty new in that space because I'm not an attorney. I've supported PTAB practitioners since 2014. I've been a litigation paralegal for over 22 years or so. So not strange to the field, but it is a little bit unique perspective because from a paralegal perspective, the support perspective, we've seen a lot. But I always felt really welcome, and I really do enjoy and like you hungry for the private perspective. I'm just hungry for perspectives. So Let's get started. How did you choose to become a patent attorney? And do you think you picked the right path?
So I'll sort of start with your second question first. I try to avoid thinking about things as being the right path or not the right path. I can sort of look back over my career and my personal life, and there's the path. You make choices along the way. They lead you to other things. And I feel very content with the path that I have chosen along the way that has led me to become a patent attorney. So I don't think there really is a right path.
I think it's more of a journey. It really does not have a destination. And it's sort of like you may be able to take detours. Maybe this is a trick question. So some people was like, well, I definitely think that I picked the right path. It's like, So for my own interview, when people were asking me, I was like, I don't think I'm finished yet.
No, and I
So-
don't think I'm finished either, for sure. But I've always loved solving problems. That to me keeps me motivated and keeps me intellectually interested in the work. And that can be any kinds of problems, technical problems, business problems, and of course, legal problems, since I have chosen to be a lawyer. So I like solving problems and I like new challenges. And I feel like being a patent attorney gives you those things basically every day. It can be a new case where you have to learn about a new technology. I've had the pleasure throughout my career of working on all kinds of different technologies, computer technologies, life sciences-based technologies, medical devices. And so learning new technologies and figuring out how to explain them to different audiences is one of the challenges of being a patent attorney that I really enjoy. Looking at different legal issues, thinking about the strategy between arguments in different forums. So a lot of times now as patent practitioners, you have a dispute that's in front of the PTAB, but also potentially a patent infringement litigation district court or in the ITC, the International Trade Commission. So thinking about the strategy between those different forums. And so I got to the right place of being a patent attorney because it's a job that constantly challenges you, keeps you on your toes, and makes you constantly think about difficult problems.
So besides being a patent guru, can you tell us 3 things that define Jessica Kaiser?
Yeah, so you had sent me this question beforehand, and I think it's always tricky when someone asks you, what are the things that define you? Because it makes you really think about what makes you tick, how you perceive yourself, and how other people perceive you. So as I thought through this, one very obvious one to me was family. I have 2 wonderful children. I have a husband that I've been married to for my entire adult life for 26 years. And I very much enjoy spending time with them, having adventures with them, playing board games and being with each other, but also just being with my extended family and a group of friends who have become family. I think the time that I spend with the folks closest to me are a big part of what defines me. The second thing I thought of was humor. I love making jokes. I have a very dry, sarcastic sense of humor that not everyone gets necessarily until they get to know me a little bit better. But I think it's important, especially because being a lawyer and being a patent lawyer can be such a serious, intense job, that taking the edge off with humor, lightening the mood when things start to feel very heavy, that's a big part of who I am as well. And then the third aspect that I thought about for this question was having what I'll call a no-quit attitude. A few years ago, I got very involved with endurance sports, did a full Ironman triathlon. I ran a 50K, maybe a little obsessive about the whole thing. But one thing I really learned about myself through that process was, I think it's true of me and it's true of a lot of people, you have more mental toughness than you give yourself credit for. And so when things get hard, you can choose to carry on instead of giving up. And I think that's become a huge part of what defines me as well. It's that no quit attitude.
So grit, basically.
Grit. Yeah, grit, resilience, that sort of thing. Absolutely.
Yeah, I read like Angela Duckworth's book on grit. I'm Chinese immigrant, and my parents, I witnessed them with a really severe amount of grit because not speaking English and starting in a foreign land, basically. And I remember when they were, it was funny, but maybe not to them, when they had to apply and take the citizenship test to get naturalized. So my parents used to run a Chinese restaurant in Lawrence, Kansas. And I remember that I was sort of a poli-sci major. So obviously I understand the questions and stuff like that. But my parents, had to get them like cassette tapes at the time and basically play the questions, and it was like, how many senators are there in the United States? How many representatives in the House of Representatives? So they had to learn all of those things and they passed. So we're all US citizens. And my brother, my youngest brother, didn't have to take the test. He lucked out because my parents took the test and he was underage at the time. So he did not have to take the test, but got naturalized. But that was like pure grit, like 7 days a week. When I was a student, like Mother's Day, graduation day, when I was growing up, those are the days that's super busy at the restaurant. So when on weekends, when people were like, when are you going to come out to, basically just hang out with us? I'm like, no, gotta work. And we were in a college town. So sometimes the customers will rat on me when I go out and play because they would tell my parents, it's like, oh, your daughter did not come to work because she was at other places. I was like, oh. So that was kind of tough. But I think like for them, they really did everything that they could. But because I grew up in a college town, I actually got to know many professors. So I think intellectual curiosity wise, it was much more of the academic community that helped me grow. And my parents gave me the work ethics, because you kind of have to do it.
Yeah.
And I had like this Japanese American woman and her lay husband. I mean, she's passed already, but her husband was like a really big pharmacology professor. And they had a building named after him too, on the campus. And she just took such an interest in me. And whenever she came to the restaurant, I would be the person that served that table. And it would be like a whole table of Japanese scholar. And for some reason, she just treated me as her granddaughter. She had plenty of grandkids, but she just really took an interest in me and treated me as a granddaughter. So even after I graduated, she gave me a scholarship to study as a paralegal. I was already working at a construction litigation firm, but then I wanted to do more. And so she was like, go find out what program you want and then let me know. It was really interesting. Then she just wrote me a check, sent me a check. She was like, okay, you are going to do this. And this is my sponsorship for you. And I had a hard time accepting it because I don't like accepting gifts from people, but I like giving gifts.
You love giving gifts.
I think it's a Chinese culture.
Yeah, in the time I've known you, I definitely know that you love giving gifts.
And I am actually really good gift giver in terms of like, I'm very thoughtful that way.
Yeah.
I'm very creative and stuff like that. Anyway, I actually did a lot to help me. She was like 80 at the time, and she really was a pioneer woman that helped me understand the hardship of Asian American in the academic community. Because her husband was, for a Japanese American that basically get to the top of their field. And she told me so many stories that were like really tough, but they persevere. It was, again, grit. So that was really, really helpful. I had really amazing people along the way that helped me up. So I love your answer. So I just wanted to share that with you.
No, I appreciate that. I love those stories. And I do think there, we talked about paths before. There are always people that you can look at along your path or your journey who gave you that little extra push, and you can think, gosh, if I didn't have a relationship with that person, or if I hadn't met that person, would I have ended up in the same place? So I like hearing your stories about those people for you.
I have a lot of people that actually, I wasn't sure exactly why at the time that people were like taking such an interest in me and like helping me, and which is one of the reasons why I really wanted to use VPG as a vehicle to help other people. So I have a couple of young women, many women, but a couple of them that I really do enjoy watching them grow, because it's pretty special to be able to take that position and help someone have a different experience in their formative years.
Yeah.
Before they are completely tainted by society.
Before they've become old and jaded.
Well, I just love our conversation. So let's get to the next one. How do you feel about being a PTAB practitioner? And where would you like to see women practitioners in patent litigation and PTAB in the future? Loaded question.
Yeah. So, I mean, I love being a PTAB practitioner. So, as you know, I was a PTAB judge for 7.5 years. I was also in private practice before that. At a different law firm. And the last time I was in private practice, the AIA proceedings in front of the PTAB were just getting started. And so until going back into private practice this last year, most of my PTAB experience was actually as an administrative patent judge. And so, of course, that's a different perspective. That's the perspective of, calling balls and strikes and being a neutral decision maker. So it has been a really interesting experience to go back and now view those proceedings as an advocate. But for all the reasons I talked about before about loving solving problems, I really like practicing in front of the PTAB. It's a very intellectual pursuit because you really have to dive deep into the technology. You have to be very clear in your explanations in front of the PTAB as an advocate. And so I just really like all of that. On your question about where I would like to see women practitioners in patent litigation and PTAB, I think that's kind of a loaded question because the answer is basically everywhere. The PTAB Bar Association that did a study that hopefully people in this space are well acquainted with that showed that only about 12% of attorney appearances before the PTAB are women. And I think by any metric that seems extraordinarily low, almost lower than you would expect, although I think those of us in this space aren't surprised by the numbers being low generally. But I think we're really seeing women take a prominent role in leadership around this space with the current USPTO director, with the newly sworn in commissioner for patents. You see women across the leadership in the PTAB itself, in the management organization of the PTAB. I worked with a lot of amazing women judges at the PTAB. It was always a fun thing when we'd end up with a panel that was all women judges. I always kind of made a mental note of that. And then since I've been in private practice, just making such fun connections with other women PTAB practitioners like you, like the people I've met from being involved in the leadership of the Women's Committee, the PTAB Bar Association. So I think we continue to grow our ranks. We continue to mentor the next generation of diverse PTAB practitioners. But I guess the short answer is everywhere.
I love it. If we want to have the women practitioners everywhere, do you have any recommendations on how to make that more accessible to women practitioners in the PTAB or litigation space? I think LEAP is an amazing program for young practitioners. What would we do? Like sometimes, for example, before LEAP, and I think that traditionally oral argument is by like the lead counsel, and predominantly that will be more men than women. But I think the landscape has changed a little bit. So I would like to hear your recommendation.
This is partly a burden that falls on those of us who are at higher levels, people who are partners in law firms, people who are decision makers in-house at companies, really being willing to mentor those younger, diverse attorneys who are interested in practicing before the PTAB or doing patent litigation and finding opportunities for them. You talked about the LEAP program. My law firm has a great shadow program where, we try and give more junior attorneys opportunities to observe things or be a part of things relatively early in their career where a client might not necessarily, want to spend money for 2 attorneys, but we're investing in our young attorneys. So we give them billable credit, even if we can't actually bill that time. Mm-hmm. So those sorts of programs that really give experience. And then I think Lawyers aren't known for wanting to let go of control, I think. I think we tend to be more on the control freak side of the spectrum, probably. And so being willing to develop trust with those junior associates so that you can give up some of that control and let them go and do these arguments, I think is important. And just recognizing that we as more senior people need to be willing to do that.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I found myself, just having been in the litigation space, working with attorneys, top practitioner for like 20 some years, I found myself very risk averse, especially when I first came out. It was really difficult for me. I tend to see things very black and white. And so gray is not a very familiar area for me, but being a business owner and minority woman, that is like coming out to do something that is basically supporting pre-tap practitioners. Because at first I was like, I know a lot. I know how to do district court. I don't want to do ITC cases because it's really not great for my mental health. I have a lot of respect for all those who can actually do it and do it well, but I just decided ITC is not a space for me. But PTAB, for some reason, I mean, even though both are like administrative hearings, because ITC is also administrative, but I ended up really loving the PTAB space. And I haven't really I managed not to have to do like any patent prosecution related stuff for my career because I like the litigation. I think I'm masochistic, but I like the strategy.
Yeah.
I like the dynamic. And I don't want to just keep doing the tedious paperwork. I want changes,
Yeah.
So I think that's why I like litigation. And somehow, I think in 2014 was when I first had a dip in PTAB, and someone trained me on this. And then I just ended up really like it. I was a good problem solver too.
Yeah.
I got that grit from my parents. And then so I was like, oh, okay, well, I can probably do this pretty well. And when I came out to start my own business, I thought I'm going to do everything. And then I haven't touched district court cases in the 3 years I have been here. I mean, pulling pleadings is one thing, but I don't want to deal with all the confidentiality. I just want to develop a niche. And it ended up being really amazing. And I was able to really support other people and met amazing folks like you. And I just got off of an annual conference committee that people worked really hard to put on a good conference. And there was just so much collegial spirit. And I love that. At the beginning, I think it's more of me being self-conscious. When I first joined the committee, I was a little bit uncomfortable because I'm not an attorney. And so I didn't know exactly how I'm going to be integrate and whether I'm going to be treated as sort of like, for the lack of better word, as sort of a secondary citizen, but I didn't really have that feeling. And so I really do like the PTAB Bar Association for that. And I mean, practitioners like you just treat me as one of the other practitioners. I mean, obviously, I would always disclose because we don't want to have any UP out here. But I always do that. I mean, like literally when I said black and white, it's like, okay, you know that I'm not an attorney, right? And so that is something I think the training by profession, you always want to disclose to the public so there's not any ambiguity. But I really enjoyed the space, so that was pretty amazing.
Just to play off of what you just said, I do think the PTAB bar is a very collegial bar. By bar, I mean people who are involved in it. Not to say just attorneys, but the folks who practice in front of the PTAB, I think tend to be, if I compare against, the broader bar in patent litigation space, I find working with opposing counsel on the PTAB space, and I think it is just tends to be a more collegial and collaborative experience. And I think some of that is the way that the PTAB is set up to allow for stipulations to change certain due dates and things like that, meet and confer requirements before you reach out to the board, those kind of things. it just always feels to me like a space where people aren't going into things angling for a fight, if you will.
They're much less contentious. Like in litigation, I've seen so many, like, why are we, it's like throwing a motion to compel on January 2nd.
Right.
It's like, why are you doing this?
Right.
I think that's why I like the PTAB space a little bit, is you can actually focus more on the technology versus less on litigation tactics. And
I agree with that. I will say, unlike you, I have definitely, even just in the short time I've been back in private practice, done both. So I've been very involved in district court litigations as well. You probably know, after judges leave the PTAB, we have a 1-year bar before we can actually appear in front of the agency. And so that's given me some more time to hone my district court skills again. So I've done things like taken and defended expert and fact depositions. I went and argued Markman hearing in Marshall, Texas. And so, I've I've had a lot of those moments where I'm like, oh, well, you don't have to worry about that in front of the PTAB, but here's a good reminder that you do in district court litigation. So I've definitely had both experiences, and I like doing both personally because of the strategy pieces that we talked about before. Because if you're working on both, you have a sense of, okay, well, if we make this argument in front of the PTAB, how is that going to affect the district court litigation? So I find both to be really interesting and rewarding, but I do really, really like the bar and the people who practice in front of the PTAB.
Yeah.
Oh, what do I do for fun? All kinds of things. I mean,
I love Hello Kitty, cafe.
Yeah, I took my 10-year-old to the Hello Kitty cafe in Irvine in December, which was so fun. No, I love to travel. I love to spend time with my family. We love to play board games and watch movies together. During the pandemic, we actually decided we were going to watch all the Marvel movies.
Oh, wow.
So, every week we would all go down to the basement and watch a Marvel movie together, make popcorn, all that kind of stuff. But I think the balance between work and wellness is always a challenge when you have a demanding job. So I mentioned endurance sports earlier. That was something that kind of fell by the wayside for me when I went back into private practice. And now I'm in the process of working to get back in shape to make time for that. So I think it's always a bit of a struggle to make sure that your life doesn't go out of balance one way or another, but that you kind of figure out how to take care of yourself, take care of others, take care of your career.
Which is so important. What are some of the key lessons learned you would like to share with our audience?
One I thought about was being willing to take chances. I think it's so easy to get comfortable with what you know that you're good at and to sort of just hunker down in that space. But one thing I thought about here, do you know the movie Kung Fu Panda?
Yes.
So I'm a huge fan of Kung Fu Panda. And one of my favorite quotes from that movie is Master Shifu says,
yes,
if you only do what you can do, you'll never be more than you are now. If you think about that, that's such a powerful statement. It's so easy to stay, like I was saying before, with what you're comfortable with. But if you only do that, you'll never stretch and grow. And so being willing to take chances gives you the opportunity to develop new skills, to figure out that you're good at stuff you didn't even know you were good at. So that's a piece of advice I give to myself a lot, honestly, but that I think is important to share. Another one is, I think it's really important to find the people that are your people, right? The audience can't see me giving air quotes, but your people. We talked about this a little bit before when I was talking about family. Human connection is so important for feeling fulfilled in our personal lives, but also in our professional lives. And so finding the people to surround yourself with who energize you, who support you, and who you do the same for can make such a difference. And I've been very fortunate, even in the short time I've been at my new firm, to find quite a number of other IP attorneys who I've developed that kind of relationship with. And then the last one that I had for this question was to remember that your reputation is really one of the most important resources that you have. And so you really never know in this profession, in the legal profession, when the person who is your opposing counsel today might be your co-counsel later, or might be in-house counsel at your client someday. And to me, that's just like a good reminder. But, I'd always try and be a nice and kind person. I just think it's hard for me to behave any other way. But, it's important to remember that how you treat people matters, and people remember how you treated them.
Absolutely. Those are really words of wisdom. I think there's a reason why we get along. So the first one that you were talking of is basically nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Yeah.
And for someone that is so risk averse, that's actually the motto that I adapted from one of my professors. He was a Harvard Law graduate. He was a co-chair of my thesis. And then he was like remote advising me. Really amazing. He kept telling me, actually, you need to go to law school. I was like, no, I ended up going to grad school. If I just listened to everything my parents would do in terms of their teaching, I would be a very submissive person. So in terms of questioning things, not necessarily questioning people, I think Clyde, who was my professor, actually did help foster that, just keep questioning things. And nowadays there's who is this Adam Grant, organizational psychologist who does Think Again, Rethinking podcast. Amazing stuff. One of the things that when I started VPG, I ended up having a whole lot of time to read and listen to podcasts and audiobooks.
Sure.
And I just really find that what helped me gain some mental balance, because when I was with a litigation schedule, I barely had time to finish my work.
Right.
So it's like I cannot really, I feel like that I didn't have that luxury to do that. But now it's like I could just go do walking, although I do need to go back and start walk again. Use all kinds of excuses not to do it, but I need to do it again. I don't know. It's just really an amazing opportunity that I get to start this podcast.
I think, people who go off on their own and start their own businesses are amazing to me, because I think that must have felt like such a risk in the beginning, but you're so amazing at making connections with people that it's almost like I can't imagine a world where you wouldn't be successful. So I really enjoyed getting to know you and see that. In your characterization of nothing ventured, nothing gained, I think one of the things I think about is, sometimes people are so afraid to raise their hand. And so you see circumstances where someone says, okay, who wants to go take this assignment? And if you're a quiet, sort of thoughtful introvert, a lot of times you're like, no, because, that sounds scary. I don't want to do that. And so to me, it's almost like just take the risk, do something new, try something new, volunteer to do something that you're not comfortable doing. And I feel like that's, been a huge part of me going back into private practice. I don't know if you ever read the book. I think it's called The Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. I listened to it as an audiobook and I really enjoyed it, but it's sort of just this idea that instead of, when something makes you feel uncomfortable, you saying no, just saying yes and just doing it. And so much of my year this last year, coming out of the government was just sort of saying yes to everything. Like, do you want to come talk on this panel? Yes.
Yes.
Do you want to go to this conference? Yes. Do you want to go to the middle of the country and take an inventor deposition? Absolutely. So, all these things of just sort of saying yes, putting yourself out there and having faith that it will work out in the end, I think has been a big part of my last year.
So I'll tell you a funny story of how I prepped myself for this podcast. But like how you see yourself a lot of time is not how other people see you. And of course, when your friends tell you, it's like, oh, they're not telling you the truth because they are your friends, right? So I had to prepare for this podcast. What I had to do is I ended up giving myself the biggest challenge. Last year in November, I ended up interviewing a brand strategist. He was a TEDx speaker. He owned his own company. He's a branding expert. Sasha Stroud is his name. And I could have given, he's big in the space. So I took his webinar and we connected I guess one of the things is like, I'm very persistent. If you have to use a name, I would just keep asking and asking. And that's a nothing venture, nothing gain. And one time he asked me, can I help you with your vision? So I'm like, I haven't developed one yet. I need to figure out exactly what I want. But I invited him to a virtual water cooler chat. And that was just something that I came up in the middle of pandemic because I didn't want to use coffee or anything like that for wellness reason, right? So I was like, oh, virtual water cooler chat. People don't go into the office. Now they can just do it virtually. So I invited him. And for many other virtual water cooler chat, I would actually invite practitioners to go speak because I wasn't confident enough that I could carry on that conversation. But then for this one, I was like, I think I'm going to have to start a podcast. Might as well start now. I don't think he's going to let me fail. So, who is Simon Sinek, does not like to use the word fail. Falling is better. Because fall, you can get up.
Yeah.
And so I invited him, and he was like, of course, we did the prep. And I told Caitlin, I said, we're going to do this LinkedIn and Facebook Live. And she was like, are you sure? I'm like, yep, I'm sure. Because as a business owner, as a minority woman, doesn't really matter. I have to be comfortable in the space.
Yes.
If not, who else is going to? I mean, I don't need everybody to come and hire me because I want to have my wellness and work-life balance, right? So I would say no to people. But that was the one that I was petrified before we got on. But once you turn on the LinkedIn and the Facebook Live, I was able to carry on a conversation. And because of that, I always said that, oh, I did not tag. So now I have done probably about 9 or 10 interviews already. And This is only January 24th? We started in December. I have done 10 interviews already. Wow. And this has been so fun. And I'm like, you know what? Even if I for this, we can, it's just getting to know people and knowing there are other people that are maybe just as nervous as you are. And then having that common ground and encourage each other and letting people have their voice. And I think that's what virtual water cooler chat is about. So for that,
that's wonderful. So I really appreciate you having me. This has been a super fun conversation. I hope that we'll get to do it again in the future.
Great. Thank you so much, Jessica.